The Supreme Court in Britain has ruled that the Scottish Parliament does not have the power to hold a second referendum on independence. The five-strong panel of judges said the Scottish Government in Edinburgh could not organise another vote without the consent of the UK Government in London, which it has so far refused to do. First Minister of Scotland Nicola Sturgeon has been speaking. She says there are still other ways for an independence referendum to take place. She's also pushed back on any suggestion that being part of the UK is voluntary. Have a listen.
Let's be absolutely blunt. A so-called partnership in which one partner is denied the right to choose a different future, or even to ask itself the question, cannot be described in any way as voluntary or even a partnership at all. So this ruling confirms that the notion of the UK as a voluntary partnership of nations, if it ever was a reality, is no longer a reality. And that exposes a situation that is quite simply unsustainable.
And Nicola Sturgeon there. Well, let's go straight to our Rob Watson, who can bring us up to date. Rob, so some legal clarity there, but has this ruling come as a surprise?
I don't think it has come as a surprise, and some cynics would say that despite Mr Sturgeon saying that it was disappointing, that it hasn't come as a surprise to the SNP, and that actually that they are secretly perhaps rather relieved that they don't have to have a referendum next October because the polling suggests that things are very finely balanced. That's the cynical interpretation, that it sort of gets them off the hook from having to hold a referendum, but allows them nonetheless to keep saying, well, it's those beastly politicians in London that stop us from being able to exercise our kind of democratic rights to choose whether we want to be in the UK or not. So that's the sort of the idealistic version and the cynical version, Yalda.
Yeah, I mean, the fact remains, as you know, Rob, it doesn't really change the core politics of any of this.
No, it doesn't. And a court was never going to do this. I mean, essentially, you have a political dispute here. And frankly, it's difficult to see exactly when or how this is going to end, because it's either going to end with Scotland becoming independent or somehow the sort of support for the Scottish National Party and the support for independence ebbing away over the coming months and years. But at the moment, that's not where we are. Where we are is a sort of, the polling suggests, a 50-50 split in whether Scottish people would like independence or not, and a sort of total stalemate between London and Edinburgh, and absolutely lots of bad blood and mudslinging.
Yeah, and Nicola Sturgeon has also said that perhaps the next general election can be used as some kind of de facto referendum.
Yes, that moves us on to the sort of practicalities of all this, Yalda. Excuse me for not bringing it up before, which is what happens next. And essentially what the Scottish National Party is saying is, look, we'd have preferred a referendum, or maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Seeing as we can't have that, let's make the next general election, which needs to be held sometime between now and January 2025, let's make that about a de facto referendum on independence. So it's a tricky one, though, because the way people vote in general elections in this country, they vote about all sorts of stuff, about health, about economics, climate change. I mean, who knows what personalities. So it's a tricky one, but that's the direction they're heading in, and they're going to meet early next year, the sort of executive, the leadership of the Scottish National Party, to try and figure out how they're going to pull this off.
Yeah, and as you've just said, I suppose the polls show that people are pretty much right down the middle. It's 50-50 on this.
Yes, I mean, the polling, it's worth looking back to what happened. So in 2014, when they actually had the real referendum 1, it was a 10% lead for the staying in the UK. At the moment, if you look at the sort of average of polls, it is about 50-50, and there's no doubt that Brexit has had a big effect, because many of the people in Scotland who voted Remain, as far as they're concerned, all their worst fears about Brexit have come true. But Brexit is a sort of double-edged sword, because many Remainers in Scotland will think, well, hang on a minute, you know, Brexit has proved pretty bad. It's been proved pretty difficult to leave the EU. How bad might it be for Scotland leaving the UK?
OK, Rob, thank you so much for all of that, to bring us up to date on all of your analysis.